Hello and welcome back to Kerbal Explosive Kolonisation. Now, to start us off today, I have been away for a while, and I apologise for anybody looking for more episodes, but I've been getting married, and the rest of my life has essentially died for the past 4 or 5 weeks, until that was all over and sorted. I am now the owner of a proud wife, and she'll kill me for saying that, but yes, so back to the show. As you can see here, we are starting off in the map because we wanted to do a little bit of a refresher and show you what's going on. Some of you may have forgotten, and I know I definitely have. So I thought while I went through it, everybody else could go through it too. Aha! Onwards! So at the first of the visits that we have here is the Heaven One. This is a station that is actually orbiting Lathe at the moment, and I need to do some things to it because I have some trusses that are actually being deprecated. So this needs to be changed. So there's going to be 2 builds of station parts, and at the moment it's actually, shortly it's going to be building a drive core for one of the spaceships that I've created, which is a bit of an autonomous builder. So that's what's going on with the Heaven One. Next, here we have the Exploration Builder, Autonomous Builder. I'm not quite sure what I'm going to call this one yet, but it's looking quite nice. It has the ability to use these expandable modules for a little bit more cargo, or it can reconfigure in many ways. It has a little bay there for taking different sort of landers or things like that, and it also has a massive 3.75 meter docking ring on the back to actually attach a drive section to it. Part of the reason I did this is because some of the technology in the mods is changing, and I might want to swap out a drive mod for something else. I'm looking at expanding the solar system, putting in a mod with more planets, so that's why I left that a little bit open. So the next solar system, okay, I have recovered, I can speak again. We are now down on the surface at Lathe, and this is the landing base. This is the first big base. We have a couple of little Kerbals here who are basically ticking it over at the moment. This is my main base for launching supplies up to the orbital station so that I can create things. Now, this wasn't set in a brilliant place. It doesn't have exotic material, so it can't really manufacture equipment. However, it does have everything for rocket parts, so now that it's built, it doesn't really need equipment, so I'm kind of just considering leaving this here. The problem I'm having with it is a huge drain on frames per second. This usually runs at around about 8 frames per second, and as you can see me move it around, this is at actual time, so you can see how sort of slow it is when I'm moving things here, and it's sped up an awful lot. We have on the left there, you can see 2 of our rocket ships, which are, I just built a little launcher for getting people off of the planet, so they will be there so that I can get people into them. I also have this ship on the right hand side, as you can see me rotating it around, and now at the top of the screen, which I can't get into anymore because the launch pad exploded and it's just sat there. So I'm not quite sure what I'm going to do with this. I might not actually do anything with it because it seems to be able to run completely automated. So we'll see what happens. I'll revisit this at some point in the future, but for the moment it's working okay. I'm just going to take the Kerbals off it at some point and then see what's what. Now, as we're dropping back into the Kerbal system, we are in at Juna, and this is the DSS station, the Juna space station. This at the moment has some Kerbals on it, but they are all actually in the warp ship, and I don't want them to be here. I want to try and bring as many of the Kerbals back as possible. However, this particular base also has a small issue. It also has some of the trusses that are deprecated, so we're going to have to adjust that, slash just pull them off. But it does have drone controls on it, so we can do it automated. So at some point in this episode, I am actually going to return all of the Kerbals from this particular station back to Kerbin, because as I say, that's a warp ship, so it can happen very fast. And for anyone who may have forgotten about it, here we have the Infinity. This is actually on its way to Eve, and it has a very interesting engine on it. It's basically it's an engine that has its own fuel. Once the engine is dead, the ship is dead. But I built it as a bit of an experiment, and as you can see here, it's actually gone up quite a way to make quite an aggressive entry to Eve, which was not a brilliant plan in the first place. But we have a whole load of people in cryostasis in this, and once it gets to Eve, we're actually going to take them out of cryostasis and see what we can do with the base that's around about Eve. but for the moment they are just floating asleep. And finally, of all of the Occupado stations, this is just the ISS station. This is the station that it was originally around about Kerbal, and I managed to move it out to the moon. I think that's correct. It could have been out about Minmus, but I have completely forgotten. It's been so long. But yes, so this is our basic station that's actually out around the moon. It has a couple of people on board. It has basic facilities for building things, and there is not much else to say about this. I'm going to try and recover the Kerbals off of this as well, and that's basically so that when I go through an upgrade procedure and fire on the last of the mod upgrades, because everything's pretty much been upgraded and finalised for 1.3.1, which is what I'm playing in. I'm going to upgrade everything, see what happens, and then I can use that as just a standalone system, and when Kerbal goes through its upgrades and its patches with the new DLC that's coming out for it, then it's unaffected and my system's running as good as it can. There's also a couple of things I want to pull out just because I don't really use them. Anybody that knows me through these series will know that I often play with it and try and get the best sort of frames per second, and also loading times between scenes. Having a lot of mods affects your loading times, so I want to try and smooth that out. And lastly, on this little visit, I want to go into the strategies. Now that I've pretty much unlocked everything that I need to, I figure it's time to pull out some of the strategies and add in some new ones. So this is exactly what we're going to do. I'm going to pull out some of these. I'm going to try and add in as best as I can manage at the moment so that science just generates funds. And after a little bit of humming and hawing with them, I managed to get to the point where I'm roughly satisfied that everything that I'm using here, I can sort of make as much money as I can possibly make off of the science while I'm doing things. So I'm still going to be trying for science because it'll get me more money to launch it Kerbal. But at the same time, I also want to be trying to build off-world more because that's where the resources are, so it's more fun. And now all of that is out of the way, we are back to our first launch. So what I also want to do on the planet is build a little recovery base up at Baikonur at the other Kerbal field. So this is just the standard skiff that everybody's seen me use umpteen times over, and all I'm doing with it is I'm actually using it as an ICBM just to launch something across the Baikonur in a fairly easy manner. Now this skiff actually has a whole load of things to build a base in it, and what I'm trying to do is trying to land on point and be able to set up a little base at Baikonur, partially for recovery but partially for generating materials and things like that for whatever I particularly need. I'm going to put a few of these around about Kerbal so that I am not just limited to building exactly what I need off of the money that I have in the KSC, so that I have a little bit more revenue coming in from Kerbal. I feel like that's a less cheaty way of doing it. But here we go. As you can see, I've got aerodynamic effects because, well, I had a big computer crash, and unfortunately you'll probably hear some sound differences because I've lost all of my profiles for Vegas. I had to go through and reinstall absolutely everything, thanks to the Microsoft engineers who said, oh yeah, we'll just update your system, and then stopped it from booting, and it took me a week to reinstall the thing, which was fun while everything else was going on. But these are the problems we foresee. Definitely first world problems though. So yeah, this was set up and the recording key was the same as the aerodynamic overlay key. So after a little bit of changing, I managed to sort it out. But here we have our first little base down, and I decide to start manufacturing things, to start putting things up. However, I noticed that I don't have equipment. So after a little while, I put up our first thing, but I can't actually inflate it because I don't have any equipment to plug into it. So I realise how daft I've been and that I need to send out some more things. So after a little bit of jerry rigging, something that I've been using for a while, I created a small bomber and just fly it straight over there using the high efficiency engines from the OPD. And after a quick skip in the video, we're across at Baikonur. And after some interesting adjustments to try and get this in the right place for launching these, we managed to get roughly over and dropped by 2 little parachute bombs. I figured this was a little bit safer than the usual way I do things. But obviously you still have to stay within the physics area. So for some weird reason I decided to land. But there we go, we have 2 little containers full of equipment. And seeing as that works, then we could just fire up this plane and send it back. So what I decide to do next is to actually take some of the interstellar ships and use them as a little bit of heavy lifting and also a bit of KISS containment. So I send these out with the entire plan of using them to move things about. Obviously these are quite interesting ships. They're not particularly fuel efficient. They can get to orbit, but what I do is I take this up and I basically do a little bit of an atmospheric jump. So I'm hopping out one side, hopping back in the other. However, I am not particularly efficient. At least I'm not as efficient as I had actually hoped. So I lose a little bit more fuel than I'm expecting, but that's perfectly fine. That's what keeps these sort of level. But I managed to get down there and land with some KISS space. So we get it on the ground. No assistance required, that was all manual and I was really happy with it. And then we hover ourselves over to where the actual pad is, and this is the point where I realise that I recovered the ship that had all the modules in it. And I feel like a complete and utter idiot. Which is not an unusual feeling for me. So we launch again. And we land again. Which is not a bad landing for me for once. And I even send out a little vehicle that has to cross the ocean to get there, so that I can do a little bit of repairing. Nobody saw that. Yes, honestly, I didn't crash it. Yeah, I was getting pretty tired at this point. I essentially have a 3-day hangover after the wedding, so yeah. We managed to get there nice and gently, and I do have a propeller on the bottom of this thing. So we send this out. A day or so later we managed to cross the ocean and continue the drive, but we take this all the way, drive it all the way out to Baikonur. Now to be honest, right after this point I jumped in Vessel Mover and shifted it across the land because I was having problems with the hills and I didn't want to drive all the way around, having left this thing to go across the ocean itself. But after that tiny bit of cheating we actually managed to get to Baikonur. And I have skipped ahead, I actually skipped too far when I did this, but we have our little tuggy vehicle out here, which can be used for transferring KISS parts about. And as you can see up on the hill there, there is actually some debris there from something that I launched that just exploded on landing. And I completely forgot to film it, but it has some equipment in one of the cargo pods, so I might go and get that. I do originally try and get it with this mover, but as you can see, not much is going on. So at some point I might go and get that equipment, but for the moment it's just going to stay there. But now, finally we are back in space. So, as I said earlier, I wanted to recover the crew that were on the Juno space station. So we undock from that, then after we undock and slightly change the orbit, I remember to hit the record button. And then we head back to Kerbal. Now, the way that this warp mod works, it is very sensitive to gravity well, so when you're close to a planet it's quite difficult to accelerate, but the growth is exponential as you get away, so you have to kill the throttle quickly and then work out what you're doing. So as you can see there, Juno and Kerbal are actually in roughly the same orbital velocity, so my plan is to come up to the back side of Kerbal, essentially behind it in its orbital path, and sit myself there, which with the difference in velocities should shoot me away from Kerbal in a backwards velocity. However, Kerbal's actual gravity will slow me down. So using that gravity assist, I can just sit at Kerbal, accelerate away, and then Kerbal will slow me down, and if I just keep using the warp drive to move closer to it, then I'll be able to overcome this. This was the original plan, however, as it turns out, I underestimated and I didn't need to do as much of that. As you can see here, I'm getting fairly close to it, I've gotten right up next to Kerbal, and it turns out that my velocity, as I got closer, my velocity was close enough that I managed to adjust the orbit right down to the point where I only needed a little bit of thrust. I actually came too close, as you can see there. I managed to change my orbit entirely. But I used a little bit of thrust to correct the orbit, which I can't do at full thrust because, as you can see, it's spinning there. I'm obviously unbalanced because I have a landing chip on one side of this. That makes no issue in warp, but it's a major one when you're using a central thruster. But we get close enough, and although it's not a stable orbit, I'll take it. So we undock all of the crew, and then I decide to use the atmosphere to brake. And my original idea was use the atmosphere to bring it down into a stable orbit and then pick a landing pad. And we close everything for heading nose first through the atmosphere. And I start getting some worrying heating going on. So I flip it around and use the thruster to burn off some of the heat. Slash not explode. So we are just going down to the surface. Which is perfectly fine, this thing is designed for this. Although it was designed to land on Duna, never on Kerbal. But it turns out it can do so adequately. So trying to pick a bit of a flat landing area, I can't really control the parachutes. So gear down, and one of the smoothest landings yet. Now once I've done this, I launch this. Now this was my original idea for an exotic miner. And I launched this over to Baikonur. And my entire point in this is just to provide a way to move some of the stuff from that large cargo pod that you saw. So after a little stop to grab some of the fuel and the cargo, the equipment should I say, that's in that, I managed to perform a sort of smooth landing. Yeah, this is built for heavy landings, hence the thrusters. But we managed to last. So we get this thing parked, we get it hooked up, and then we start recycling parts of it. So this gives me equipment to inflate some of the things, and then recycling parts of it gives me more equipment. And the idea for this is just going to be a little base that is, in its entire purpose, is to build another base. I have something designed in a spaceplane hangar, which I'm just going to put down a couple of stakes and build it in situ. And that will give me the ability to mine some things, send it back. Also, where it is, I get full recovery amount of Baikonur if you're recovering things here. So it's a very good situation for pulling things back, and it also helps with the mining and helps with some money production as well. But as I say, in a less cheaty way. This feels a bit right. I don't like seeing it when people just throw out mining things and then mine on the launch pad for a couple of weeks and recover it. It feels a bit too cheaty doing things like that. So in general, that's where I'm up to at the moment. Thanks for watching. The next episodes will be a lot more in depth. I am finally back at it, so there will be more of a regular thing. And please leave comments. I like reading the comments. If anybody's got suggestions or ideas, or there's bits that you don't like, bits that you do like, it's always nice to hear. So please leave comments. And I shall see you next time. Thanks for watching. Bye.